"We're going to live with you," said two Apache girls to the cowboy who bought a cabin. The red dust of the planet swirled around the small cabin as Jack Malone wiped the sweat from his brow. He had just finished repairing the wooden roof, which had taken a pounding during the last windstorm. The cabin sat on a high plateau overlooking a valley full of jagged rocks and alien flora, glowing faintly in the late afternoon sun. It was not Earth, not by any measure, but it reminded Jack of the old frontiers he had once roamed. He liked the silence. He liked the freedom. Jack was a man of few words and fewer friends. The galaxy had taught him that trust came slowly, and solitude was sometimes the safest companion. He had purchased this cabin months ago, escaping from crowded colonies and noisy cities. Out here, life was simple. The alien creatures were strange but predictable. Water was scarce but manageable, and for the first time in years, Jack could breathe. He stepped back from the cabin and surveyed the land. The wind carried scents of strange blossoms that glimmered under the dying sunlight. His boots sank slightly into the warm, red soil. Out here there was no one to judge him, no one to tell him what to do, just him and the quiet. Then came a voice, clear and loud, cutting through the peaceful hum of the wind. "We're going to live with you." Jack froze mid-step. His hand instinctively went to the blaster strapped to his side. He scanned the horizon, expecting some alien intruder or perhaps a scavenger trying to rob his supplies. But there was no threat, just two young girls standing at the edge of the plateau. The first girl had long, dark hair that glimmered like black silk in the sunlight. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, and her posture suggested confidence far beyond her age. The second girl was slightly smaller, with curly hair tied into a ponytail and a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. Both wore clothes made of rough fabric and leather, suitable for traveling in the harsh terrain, yet decorated with bright beads and small feathers that seemed more ceremonial than practical. Jack blinked. "Excuse me," he asked, keeping his hand near his blaster but trying to stay calm. "Who are you and why are you talking like that?" The older girl, who seemed to be the leader, stepped forward with a smile. "We're Arya and Lilu. We are Apache from the human colony far to the west, and like we said, we're going to live with you." Jack's brow furrowed. He had heard of scattered human colonies in this sector, struggling to survive among alien predators and harsh climates. But the girls looked too young to be traveling alone. "Alone?" he asked, his voice cautious. "Where are your parents?" Arya shook her head. "They're gone. The colony, it couldn't survive. We've been walking for days, following the trail of settlements. When we heard there was a human here, we decided to come. You're the first one we found who seemed safe." Jack felt a mixture of surprise and unease. He had expected solitude, not visitors. He had expected peace, not responsibility. But something in the girl's eyes told him they were not just helpless children. They were survivors, and survivors were important in this world. "Safe," Jack repeated. "And you think living with me is safe?" "Yes," Lilu said firmly. "We can help ourselves, but it's better if we are together. Humans are stronger when they work together. You'll see." Jack rubbed his jaw and sighed. He had spent years alone, and the thought of suddenly having two young humans living in his cabin was unsettling. But he also knew the galaxy. He knew the dangers that lurked beyond the plateau, and he knew that the girls could not survive alone for long. "All right," he said finally. "You can stay, but only for a while until I see if this works. No funny business, got it?" Arya and Lilu exchanged a quick glance and nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir," they said in unison. Jack motioned for them to follow him toward the cabin. As they walked, he noticed how careful they were with each step, scanning the environment like young hunters. Their eyes seemed to pick up on details he had overlooked, small tracks in the soil, faint sounds in the distance, a sudden shift in the wind. He realized quickly that these girls had survived for a reason. Inside the cabin, Jack had made it simple but livable. A small fireplace took up one wall, with a table and a few chairs. A bed made of recycled fabric and local wool sat in the corner. Jack's supplies were stacked neatly: water containers, preserved food, basic tools, and a few weapons. The girls immediately began exploring. Arya inspected the storage crates while Lilu wandered to the small window overlooking the valley. "This is amazing," Lilu whispered. "I've never seen a place like this." Jack chuckled softly. "It's nothing fancy," he said, "just a roof over your head. And out there," he nodded to the valley, "is a lot of trouble if you're not careful." Arya looked at him seriously. "We can handle trouble," she said simply. "We've been surviving for a long time. We know how to stay alive." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Have you now?" "Survived what exactly?" She hesitated for a moment, then said quietly, "Storms, predators, hunger, losing people we care about. We know what it takes to live." Jack felt a pang in his chest. He understood loss. He understood hunger and fear. And he also understood courage. These girls had more courage than many adults he had met. "All right," he said finally, sitting down on the edge of his bed. "You can stay, but you'll have to help around here. The cabin doesn't run itself. You'll chop wood, carry water, and keep watch." "Yes, sir," they chorused again, clearly happy to have a purpose. The first night was quiet. Jack sat by the fireplace while the girls curled up on a makeshift bed nearby. The wind howled outside, rattling the cabin walls, and strange cries echoed through the valley. Jack kept his blaster within reach, but he didn't need it. The girls had already begun whispering to each other about what they had seen during the day, sharing observations about the alien terrain and creatures. Jack listened, impressed by their sharpness. "Jack," Arya whispered finally, "why did you come here alone?" Jack thought for a long moment. "Because out there," he said, gesturing vaguely to the valley, "people get in your way. They make life complicated. Out here you can think. You can survive on your own. You can be free." Lilu frowned slightly. "But isn't it better to have people you trust, people who care?" Jack stared into the fire. She had a point, he realized. Freedom was important, but humans were strongest together. Perhaps that was why these girls had come to him. Perhaps that was why he had survived this long, because he had learned, even unconsciously, to notice strength in others. The next morning, Jack woke to the smell of cooking. The girls had already started a small fire outside and were preparing breakfast using dried rations they had carried. He watched silently for a moment, then finally stepped outside. "Looks like you've been busy," he said. Arya smiled. "We thought you might like some company," she said, placing a simple breakfast of boiled roots and dried meat on a flat stone. Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "You girls are unbelievable." The day passed with work and lessons. Jack showed them how to gather water from a nearby stream without disturbing the fragile ecosystem. Arya taught him how to identify edible plants and track small animals that could provide food. They worked together seamlessly, a team forming faster than Jack expected. By evening, Jack realized something he hadn't felt in a long time: a sense of belonging. The cabin no longer felt empty. The plateau no longer felt lonely. For the first time in years, he felt hope, not just for survival, but for life. As the sun set behind the jagged rocks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jack watched the girls laughing as they examined glowing plants near the cabin. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, a feeling he hadn't expected in this harsh, unforgiving world. "Looks like we're going to have a good life here," Arya said, noticing his gaze. Jack nodded slowly. "Yeah," he replied. "Yeah, I think we will." And for the first time, the grizzled cowboy allowed himself to believe that the journey ahead, with two brave young girls at his side, might be something worth fighting for. The morning sun painted the valley in soft shades of orange and gold. Jack Malone, the cowboy, woke before the girls, as was his habit. He stretched his arms, letting the chill of dawn sweep through the cabin, and listened to the sounds of the planet waking up. Strange birds called from the distant cliffs, and a low hum vibrated through the ground as some massive creature moved unseen across the red plains. He stepped outside and found Arya already kneeling by the small garden they had started, examining the alien plants with care. Lilu was nearby, picking up rocks and examining tracks in the dirt. Both girls looked completely at home in the wild environment. Jack felt a strange mix of awe and curiosity. How had they survived so long on this harsh planet? "Morning," he called. Arya looked up and smiled. "Morning, Jack. We were checking the plants. Some of them are edible and some, well, they sting if you touch them." Jack nodded, impressed. "Good. I'll show you the safer ones later. Can't have you getting hurt on your first week." Lilu scampered over, holding a small, jagged rock. "Look at these tracks, Jack. They're fresh. Big paws. I think it's a zorak." Jack frowned. The zorak was a predator native to the valley, known for hunting in packs. He had spotted one or two from a distance before, but never this close. "Stay calm. Don't run," he instructed. "If it's near, it's probably just passing through, but we need to be careful." The girls nodded, listening intently. Jack could see the trust forming in their eyes. They were young, but they were learning fast. Breakfast was a quiet affair, consisting of roasted roots, dried meat, and water from the nearby stream. Jack watched as the girls ate, noticing how they shared their portions evenly and without complaint. They had learned the value of rationing. He admired that. Humans had survived for centuries on instinct, innovation, and cooperation, and these two young girls embodied all three traits. After breakfast, Jack decided it was time to teach them some of the basic survival skills he had learned over the years. "We'll start with tracking," he said, leading them toward the wide plains that stretched beyond the plateau. Arya and Lilu followed eagerly. Jack showed them how to recognize animal tracks in the dirt and how to tell which direction the creature had gone. He demonstrated how to spot broken twigs, disturbed rocks, and subtle changes in the soil. Arya's sharp eyes picked up everything. "That track is fresh," she said, pointing to a set of deep impressions in the red soil. "It passed through here just a few hours ago. Big, like you said, must be a lone hunter." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You've got a good eye. You'll do fine out here." Lilu, while smaller and less precise, had her own strengths. She could sense changes in the wind and knew how to follow faint sounds over long distances. Together, the girls made an excellent team. Jack began to see why they had survived so far on their own. By midday, they had tracked a small herd of alien grazers to a watering hole. Jack watched as the girls crouched low, pointing out safe spots to hide and how to remain unseen. "You move like shadows," he said softly. "I can't teach that. You've got it naturally." Arya grinned. "We had to survive. You learn fast when you have no choice." Jack felt a pang in his chest. He knew what it meant to survive alone, but these girls had carried it further. They had learned to survive as children. It was both impressive and humbling. As the sun climbed higher, the sky turned a deep, burning red. Jack suggested they head back to the cabin before the heat became unbearable. On the way, he noticed a group of scavengers in the distance, human-like but with strange mechanical enhancements. They were watching him. Jack signaled to the girls to hide. They ducked behind rocks, barely making a sound. Jack studied the scavengers through a small telescope. "They're curious," he murmured, "or looking for trouble. Either way, we need to be ready." Arya tilted her head. "We can handle ourselves, Jack. We've dealt with worse." Jack smiled slightly. "I believe that, but sometimes even the cleverest humans need to stick together. That's the real strength." Back at the cabin, Jack began to show the girls how to set up basic defenses. They worked together to build a simple alarm system using wires, small bells, and reflective materials to alert them if anything approached. The girls listened carefully, asking questions and suggesting improvements. Jack was impressed again. Their minds were sharp, adaptable, and creative. Hours passed quickly as the trio worked, shared stories, and learned from each other. Jack told them tales of frontier worlds he had explored, creatures he had faced, and humans who had survived against impossible odds. Arya and Lilu shared stories of their colony, of life before it fell apart, and the lessons they had learned from hardship and loss. By evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plateau. The valley glowed with an eerie blue light from the native flora, giving the world an almost magical quality. The girls sat near the fire, exhausted but happy. Jack leaned back against the cabin wall, feeling a rare sense of peace. "Jack," Arya said softly, "do you think we'll be safe here?" Jack looked at her, seeing both hope and fear in her eyes. "We'll be safe as long as we stick together," he replied. "Humans are clever. We survive because we think, adapt, and never give up. Out here, that's what counts." Lilu leaned against his shoulder, a small smile on her face. "I think this is the best place we've ever been," she said. Jack couldn't help but smile in return. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it's a start. And with you two around, it feels like we can handle anything." That night, the girls slept soundly, and Jack stayed awake for a while, keeping watch over the plateau. The scavengers had disappeared, but the memory of their presence lingered. He knew this world was full of dangers, predators, scavengers, and storms that could strike without warning. But he also knew that humans had a remarkable ability to endure. Together, they could survive anything. Over the next few days, the trio settled into a rhythm. Jack taught the girls more advanced skills: how to make tools from the local materials, how to read the weather, and how to hunt safely when necessary. The girls, in turn, showed Jack techniques from their Apache heritage: how to move silently, how to track invisible creatures, and how to use the terrain to one's advantage. One afternoon, while checking the perimeter, Arya spotted something unusual: strange marks on the ground, deeper than any normal creature could make. "Jack, look at this," she said. "Something big passed through here." Jack knelt down, examining the tracks. He nodded slowly. "You're right, that's not a Zoraka or anything I've seen before, but it's intelligent. We'll have to be careful." The girls nodded, their expressions serious. Jack realized that despite their youth, they were already thinking strategically, anticipating threats and planning responses. He felt a surge of pride. These girls were not just surviving, they were thriving. That night, as the stars glittered above the plateau, Jack felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The cabin was no longer just a shelter. It was a home, and these two young girls, brave and clever, had become his family. "We'll be ready for anything," Jack said quietly, almost to himself. "Together, nothing can stop us." Arya and Lilu, asleep in their small bed, seemed to echo that sentiment in their dreams, and for the first time, Jack believed it. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying the scent of strange flowers and distant danger. But inside the cabin, there was warmth, trust, and a growing bond that nothing could break. Humans were survivors. Humans were fighters. And together, they were unstoppable. The morning sun barely peeked over the red cliffs when Jack Malone stirred from his restless sleep. The previous day had been full of lessons, work, and laughter with Arya and Lilu. But Jack knew the frontier world was unforgiving. He felt it in the air, a tension like the calm before a storm. He stepped outside the cabin and took a deep breath. The valley was quiet, deceptively so. Jack's sharp eyes scanned the horizon, and he noticed distant shapes moving along the rocks. At first he thought they were grazing creatures, but something about their movement was deliberate, almost watchful. He called softly to the girls. "Arya, Lilu, wake up. We have visitors." The girls appeared from the cabin, rubbing their eyes but alert immediately. "Visitors?" Lilu asked, her voice low but curious. Jack nodded. "Yes, watch the valley, keep quiet and stay low." They crouched behind a ridge, peering at the approaching figures. Human scavengers, mechanically enhanced, armed, and dangerous. They were likely drawn by rumors of a lone settler. Jack had hoped the cabin's remote location would protect them, but news traveled fast. "Stay calm," Jack whispered. "We can handle this." Arya's eyes gleamed with determination. "We can help. We know the terrain. We can set traps." Jack smiled faintly. Good, let's see what you've got. The girls immediately began scanning the ground, identifying places where rocks could be loosened to roll down on attackers or tripwires could be set. Jack helped, using his knowledge of mechanics to make simple but effective alarms from old wires, small bells, and reflective plates. Within an hour, the perimeter was a maze of subtle warnings and traps. The scavengers drew closer. Their heavy boots crunched against the red soil, and their cybernetic enhancements glinted in the sun. They were skilled, but Jack knew human ingenuity could match any machine when strategy and courage were involved. Arya pointed to a narrow canyon pass. If they go that way, we can trap them, Jack nodded. Perfect. Lilu, you stay with me. Arya, take the high ground. The scavengers entered the canyon, unaware of the trap. Jack and Lilu crouched near the entrance, hiding behind jagged rocks. Jack held his blaster loosely, more as a threat than a weapon. He preferred to rely on strategy first. Then it happened. The first scavenger stepped on a hidden tripwire. A small bell rang, startling him. Instinctively, he raised his weapon, only to be hit by a small rock that rolled from above, knocking him off balance. Arya's trap worked perfectly. Jack smiled. Good work. The remaining scavengers paused, scanning the area. Jack knew they were clever. They would anticipate another trap. He whispered instructions to Lilu. Now, we use the diversion. When they come around the bend, hit the next one. Lilu nodded and adjusted a simple mechanism, a small lever that dropped a net over a narrow path. When the scavenger passed, he became tangled, struggling to free himself. Jack and Lilu held their positions, keeping calm as the others tried to assess the situation. Arya, on the high ground, had her own clever trap, a series of rocks balanced precariously above the path. She nudged one with a stick, sending a controlled cascade of stones toward the remaining scavengers. They scattered, trying to dodge, but Jack had predicted their path. Another tripwire sent one tumbling down a shallow slope. The human ingenuity of the three worked flawlessly. The scavengers, though stronger and mechanically enhanced, were unprepared for the combination of knowledge, quick thinking, and environmental advantage. Jack could not help but admire the girls. Arya, focused and precise, was like a seasoned hunter. Lilu, instinctive and quick, was almost impossible to predict, and together they were unstoppable. The scavengers regrouped, realizing they had underestimated the humans. One of them, clearly the leader, raised his weapon. Jack stepped out from behind the rocks, calm and collected. You picked the wrong target, he said firmly. The leader sneered. You're just one man and two children. Jack's eyes hardened. You forget something. Humans are clever. We survive because we think. And we fight for more than ourselves. With that, he triggered the final trap, a loud bang from a small device that created smoke and confusion. In the chaos, the girls moved swiftly, knocking down weapons and tripping scavengers with ropes and wires. Jack's calculated movements and sharpshooting kept the remaining attackers at bay. Within moments, the scavengers realized the fight was lost. Their leader shouted orders to retreat, and they vanished into the canyon, leaving behind their equipment and a bruising lesson. Jack exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. Well, that was exciting. Arya laughed softly, brushing dust from her clothes. We did it, we really did it. Lilu's eyes sparkled. We were amazing, Jack. Jack smiled, feeling a deep pride. You two were incredible. I couldn't have done it without you. They returned to the cabin, checking the traps and making sure the perimeter was secure. The day had been long and dangerous, but it had also taught them something important. Human brains and courage could outmatch any mechanical enhancement or brute strength. That evening, as the sun set in brilliant hues of red and orange, they sat by the fire. Jack handed them dried meat and roasted roots. You earned this, he said simply. Arya looked at him, eyes wide. Jack, do you think they'll come back? Jack shook his head. Maybe, but if they do, we'll be ready. And remember, it's not just the traps or the blaster. It's the way we think, the way we plan, and the way we work together. That's what makes humans strong. Lilu hugged his arm. I'm glad we came to live with you. You make us stronger too. Jack felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. Out here on a harsh, untamed planet, they were forming something rare and valuable. A family built on trust, courage, and survival. Over the next few days, the cabin became a hive of activity. Jack taught the girls more advanced skills. How to reinforce the walls with local materials, how to craft weapons from rocks and metal scraps, and how to read the sky for weather changes. The girls, in return, shared lessons from their Apache heritage, moving silently, blending with the terrain, and thinking ahead for danger. One afternoon, while scouting the surrounding cliffs, Arya spotted unusual tracks in the red soil. Jack, these aren't scavengers, she said. They're bigger, smarter, something new. Jack knelt and examined them. You're right, this is different, but it's exactly the kind of challenge humans are good at. The girls looked at him, a mixture of fear and excitement in their eyes. Jack smiled reassuringly. We've faced danger before, and we'll face it again, but together we're unstoppable. That night, under the alien stars, Jack kept watch while the girls slept soundly. He reflected on the events of the past week, the girls' courage, their intelligence, and their spirit. He realized that humans were more than survivors. They were inventors, fighters, and thinkers. And these two girls, young as they were, embodied all of that. The wind whispered across the plateau, carrying distant roars and faint echoes of creatures in the night. But inside the cabin there was safety, warmth, and a growing bond that nothing could break. Humans had survived countless worlds, countless threats, and countless challenges. And here, on this frontier planet, Jack and the girls were proving it once again. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges. New predators, new dangers, and maybe new enemies. But Jack knew, deep down, that as long as they worked together, humans could face anything. Arya and Lilu stirred in their sleep, dreaming of courage, adventure, and triumph. And Jack, watching over them, felt a quiet confidence. They were ready for the future, because humans were not just survivors. Humans were unstoppable. The stars shone brightly above and the fire crackled softly. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt truly at home. The morning was unusually quiet on the plateau. Jack Malone felt it immediately, the kind of silence that made a seasoned survivor uneasy. He had faced scavengers before, but the stillness in the valley this time carried a weight. Something was coming, something bigger. He stepped outside the cabin, scanning the horizon. The alien flora glowed faintly under the early sunlight, casting long shadows across the jagged rocks. For the past few days, the cabin had felt safe. They had defended it, tested traps, and survived. But this calm, it felt like the moment before a storm. Jack, Arya called from the garden, where she was examining the edible plants. I see something strange. Jack walked over quickly. Lilu had already crouched near a set of tracks, pointing to enormous footprints pressed deep into the red soil. Each print was larger than Jack's boot, and the pattern was irregular, unlike any animal he had seen before. What made these? Jack muttered, kneeling to inspect them. This isn't any creature I've encountered on this planet, not even the Zorak. Arya's eyes widened. It's intelligent, it's been careful. Look at the spacing, the way it avoided certain rocks. It's planning its path. Jack straightened, tension rising. We need to be ready. This is no scavenger. This is something else. Lilu nodded. We can help. We've survived hard things before. We'll survive this too. Jack felt a surge of pride. The girls had already proven themselves against scavengers, and now they were ready to face an even greater threat. He knew it would not be easy, but humans had a way of turning disadvantage into opportunity. Over the next few hours, they reinforced the cabin. Jack had scavenged metal sheets from the nearby cliffs and fashioned them into barriers. Arya and Lilu helped, using ropes and rocks to create additional traps around the perimeter. Every crevice, every path to the cabin was carefully considered. We'll make this work, Jack said firmly. "No matter what comes, we'll be ready." As the sun climbed high, a distant roar echoed through the valley. The sound was low, guttural, and carried a vibration that shook the soil beneath their feet. Jack's hand went to his blaster, but he knew brute force alone would not defeat whatever approached. The girls watched him closely. "Jack, we've got ideas," Arya said. "We can use the terrain. We can lure it into the canyon and trap it." Jack smiled. "That's exactly why I wanted you here. Humans are clever. We think, we plan, and we survive." By afternoon, they had finished setting the final defenses. Jack and Lilu hid behind the cabin, while Arya positioned herself on a nearby ridge, ready to direct the creature's movement. They had crafted a series of pits, ropes, and weighted rocks, all designed to slow down a large predator and guide it toward the traps. Then it came. The alien predator emerged from the valley floor. It was massive, twice the size of a Zorak, with 4 legs that ended in sharp claws. Its eyes glowed with intelligence, and its body shimmered faintly as though covered in a reflective armor. Every step it took left deep impressions in the soil. Jack's heart pounded. He had faced dangerous creatures before, but this one was different. It was smart. It was calculating. It was hunting them. "Stay calm," he whispered to the girls. "Use what we planned. Be precise." The predator moved slowly, scanning the plateau. It sniffed the air, its eyes locking onto the cabin. Jack signaled to Arya, and she triggered a small alarm, a line of rocks tumbling down the cliff, creating a diversion. The creature paused, tilting its head, then moved cautiously toward the canyon they had prepared. Lilu crouched beside Jack. "It's working, it's following the path," Jack nodded. "Keep ready. Once it hits the first trap, we'll see how smart it really is." The predator stepped into the canyon carefully, avoiding the first set of pits. But the weighted rock swung down, hitting its legs and slowing it. It roared in frustration, a sound that echoed across the cliffs. Jack and the girls held their ground, watching every movement, ready to act. Arya shouted from the ridge, "Now, push it toward the nets." Lilu pulled a rope, and a net fell from above, tangling the predator's legs. It struggled violently, but the traps had been designed to withstand its strength. The creature roared again, thrashing and knocking some rocks loose, but the team stayed calm. Jack fired a series of precise shots, not to kill but to guide the creature, using the environment against it. He aimed at rocks above the canyon, causing them to tumble and redirect the predator's movements. The predator lunged, but Arya had anticipated this. She triggered another trap, dropping weighted logs that slowed the creature further. Jack and Lilu moved quickly, using ropes and makeshift barriers to keep it confined to the canyon path. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower and the predator grew tired. It had strength, but humans had something it could not match: strategy and endurance. Every trap, every calculation, every small action by Jack and the girls had brought them closer to controlling the situation. Finally, the creature, exhausted and restrained by the series of traps, collapsed in the canyon. It struggled weakly but could not break free. Jack approached cautiously, keeping his blaster ready, while Arya and Lilu observed from the ridge. Jack knelt, studying the creature. "You're strong, but humans are clever. We survive because we adapt, we plan, and we never give up." The predator, despite its size and strength, looked almost impressed. It seemed to pause, as though acknowledging the human's ingenuity. Then slowly it withdrew, disappearing into the distant cliffs. The valley returned to silence. Jack exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. "That was close," he said. Arya and Lilu ran down to him, their faces flushed with excitement. "We did it," Lilu shouted. "We really did it," Jack smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride. "You two were amazing. Every trap, every move, you thought ahead. That's what humans do. We survive not just with strength but with brains and courage." The girls beamed. "We survived because we worked together," Arya said. "We're stronger when we stick together," Jack nodded. "Exactly, and this is only the beginning. Out here on this planet we'll face more challenges, but I know we can handle them. Humans are unstoppable when we work together." That night as they sat around the fire, Jack reflected on what had happened. The predator had been powerful, intelligent, and dangerous. But humans had prevailed, not because they were the strongest, but because they were clever, adaptable, and united. The girls shared their thoughts too. "We've learned so much from you, Jack," Arya said. "Not just survival skills, but strategy, patience, and thinking ahead." Lilu added, "And you've learned from us too, about moving quietly, reading the land, and trusting instincts." Jack nodded. "Yes, that's the beauty of humans. We teach, we learn, and we improve. Together, there's nothing we cannot face." Over the next few days, they repaired the traps, reinforced the cabin, and prepared for any future threats. The predator had shown them that danger was always nearby, but it had also proven something else. Humans could outthink, outmaneuver, and survive anything. The bond between Jack, Arya, and Lilu grew stronger. They had faced a true test, and they had triumphed. The cabin was no longer just a shelter. It was a fortress of human ingenuity and courage. As the sun set over the red cliffs, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Jack looked at the girls. "We're ready for anything," he said quietly. Arya smiled. "Yes, we are. Together, we're unstoppable." Lilu nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Humans are strong, we survive, we fight, and we win." Jack leaned back, feeling a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Out here on a harsh alien world, they were proving what humans could do. They were survivors, inventors, and fighters. And together, there was nothing they could not face. The wind whispered across the plateau, carrying distant roars and the faint rustle of alien creatures. But inside the cabin, there was warmth, trust, and the unbreakable bond of humans working together. And Jack knew, without a doubt, that whatever challenges came next, they would face them as one. Humans had survived countless worlds. They had faced unimaginable dangers. And here on this frontier planet, they were unstoppable. The plateau glowed in the soft light of dawn. Jack Malone stepped outside the cabin, taking a deep breath of the crisp, alien air. The red cliffs reflected the rising sun, painting the valley in shades of gold and pink. For the first time in months, Jack felt completely at peace. The cabin, once quiet and lonely, now buzzed with life, thanks to two extraordinary young girls who had become more than companions. They were family. Arya and Lilu were already outside, preparing breakfast over a small fire. Their hands moved with practiced efficiency, gathering water from the stream and chopping roots for roasting. Jack watched them, a smile tugging at his lips. Even after all the trials they had faced, the scavengers, the alien predator, they were undaunted. Their spirits were strong, their courage unbroken. "Morning, Jack," Lilu called cheerfully. "We made extra breakfast today. You have to try it." Jack chuckled. "Looks good." "You two never stop, do you?" Arya laughed softly. "We've learned from the best, Jack. You taught us how to survive. Now it's our turn to help you." Jack nodded, feeling a swell of pride. Humans were not just survivors. They were teachers, learners, and fighters. Together, they had turned a small, lonely cabin into a thriving home. After breakfast, the trio set out to explore the surrounding area. Jack wanted to ensure the plateau was safe from any new threats. As they walked, he noticed the girls pointing out edible plants, hidden water sources, and safe paths through rocky terrain. They were no longer just children. They were scouts, guides, and strategists, each step demonstrating intelligence, courage, and skill. "We've been talking," Arya said thoughtfully. "If other humans find out we're here, we could help them survive too." Jack's eyes lit up. "That's exactly what we need. Humans are strongest when we stick together. If we can share our knowledge, we can create something greater than just a cabin. We can build a community." Lilu nodded. "I like that idea. We can teach them the tricks we've learned, and you can teach them how to plan and protect themselves." Jack smiled, realizing how far they had come. The cabin was no longer just a home. It was the beginning of a settlement. One day, this plateau might become a safe haven for humans across the planet. As they returned to the cabin, Jack noticed movement on a distant ridge. At first he thought it was a creature, but then he saw figures, humans. They were small, scattered, and cautious, clearly survivors from other colonies. Jack felt a surge of hope. Humans were spreading across the planet, seeking safety, knowledge, and community. He signaled to the girls and they moved carefully, waving to the newcomers. The humans hesitated at first, then approached cautiously, drawn by the sight of the cabin and the presence of other humans. Jack stepped forward, raising his hand in greeting. "You're safe here," he called. "Come closer. There's food, water, and shelter. We can survive together." Arya and Lilu followed, smiling and offering gestures of friendship. The newcomers looked relieved, exhaustion and fear clear in their eyes. But as they drew nearer, they also saw strength, determination, and hope. Over the next few days, the plateau transformed. Jack, Arya, and Lilu taught the new arrivals how to reinforce the cabin, set traps, and survive in the harsh environment. They shared knowledge of edible plants, water sources, and safe paths through the rocky terrain. The humans worked together, guided by Jack's experience and the girls' sharp instincts. The community grew stronger each day. They built additional shelters, small gardens, and a rudimentary water system. Jack watched with pride as humans, strangers just days before, learned to cooperate, innovate, and protect one another. It was human ingenuity and resilience at its finest. One afternoon, as Jack checked the perimeter, Arya and Lilu ran up to him, faces glowing with excitement. "Jack, look," Arya said, pointing to the valley. A herd of alien grazers was approaching, moving cautiously but without fear. Jack smiled. "They've accepted us," he said. "The predators know we're here and the prey knows we're not a threat. That's progress." Lilu nodded. "We're part of this world now, Jack, and we're strong because we work together." Jack's heart swelled. Humans were adaptable, resourceful, and brave. They could thrive in the most hostile environments, not because of strength alone, but because of intelligence, cooperation, and courage. And these two girls, Arya and Lilu, had proven that even the youngest humans could embody all those qualities. Days turned into weeks. The cabin, once isolated and quiet, became a hub of human activity. New settlers arrived regularly, guided by word of mouth and the signs of life on the plateau. Each arrival brought new knowledge, new skills, and new energy. Jack, Arya, and Lilu became mentors, teaching the newcomers how to survive, plan, and protect themselves. The plateau was no longer a lonely outpost, it was a thriving community. The humans had adapted to the alien environment, using their ingenuity to create tools, shelter, and defenses. They had learned to live in harmony with the planet, respecting its creatures while asserting their presence through clever strategy and teamwork. One evening, as the sun set in a spectacular display of reds and purples, Jack sat with Arya and Lilu outside the cabin. The fire crackled and the valley below buzzed with life. Humans worked together, laughed, and shared stories. It was a scene of hope, resilience, and triumph. "Jack," Arya said quietly, "we couldn't have done any of this without you." Jack shook his head. "No, you girls taught me just as much. Humans survive because we learn, we adapt, and we never give up. Together, we're unstoppable." Lilu leaned against him, smiling. "I'm glad we came to live with you. This is our home now." Jack felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. The harsh planet, the dangers, and the challenges had all been met and overcome, not just by one person but by humans working together. Night fell, and the stars twinkled above like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Jack looked at the girls, then at the bustling valley below. Humans had turned a small cabin on a lonely plateau into a thriving community. They had survived predators, scavengers, and the harsh alien environment, and they had done it together. Arya and Lilu slept peacefully that night, knowing they were safe. Jack kept watch for a while, reflecting on the journey they had taken. The girls had arrived unexpectedly, declaring they would live with him, and now they had helped transform the plateau into a place of hope and resilience. Jack realized something profound. Humans were strongest when they worked together. Alone, they could survive. But together they could thrive. Their ingenuity, courage, and adaptability were unmatched, and on this distant, alien world they had proven it. The wind whispered through the red cliffs, carrying the scent of strange plants and distant creatures. But inside the community there was safety, warmth, and the unbreakable spirit of humans working together. Jack looked at the horizon, imagining the future. The plateau would grow. Humans would continue to spread, learn, and adapt. Challenges would come, but humans were ready. They always were. Humans had survived countless worlds. They had faced impossible odds and dangerous predators. And here, on this frontier planet, they had not only survived, they had thrived. Jack smiled as he watched the valley below, the lights of the cabin and the new shelters glowing warmly in the darkness. Arya and Lilu were asleep, their faces peaceful, their spirits unbroken. The humans around the plateau were alive, resilient, and united. And Jack knew without a doubt that this was only the beginning. Humans were unstoppable, humans would endure, humans would thrive. Because when humans worked together, nothing, not even the harshest planet, the fiercest predators, or the toughest challenges, could stand in their way. The fire flickered, the stars shone brightly, and the plateau pulsed with life. Jack, Arya, and Lilu had created more than a home. They had created a future where humans together could conquer anything.